Good evening. I must say I'm delighted to be back. As you heard, I am a person who adopted a 13-year-old child, so I wanted to explain to you a little bit about that process from my point of view, and in a few minutes you'll hear about it from my son's point of view. So I thought I would tell you how I first got involved with the Downey agency and what they did for me. Many years ago, I found myself a middle-aged woman who was divorced, which was okay, it was cool. I was a professional woman, I had a good life, but what I didn't have was a child. And being childless was something that brought me tremendous amount of pain. And it never went away, I never got past it. No matter how successful my life was, no matter how happy it was, I really just couldn't get over the idea of not having children. It wasn't something by design, it was something I very much wished had been different. And I began to think that probably or perhaps there was a way that I could do something about that. I knew that many people went abroad and adopted infants, and I guess because of my age and my career situation, I didn't think that that would be best suited for me. And I thought there must be some children out there who needed a home. Little did I know that there are hundreds of thousands of children out there who need a home. Anyway, I was with my dearest friend one day. We were sitting in my house, and I was saying to her my little tale there of, I wish I could adopt a kid, a child, a school-age kid. And she said to me, why don't you look in the yellow pages? I thought she was absolutely ridiculous, and I couldn't imagine looking in the yellow pages. I always had this picture of looking in the yellow pages for a kid, But lo and behold, she left, and the thought just kept going through my head. And I went to my closet and pulled down the yellow pages from the shelf, buried alive, and looked up adoption, and sure enough, there was the Downey agency. The following morning, I called up and I made an appointment with Sister Elizabeth, who's sitting right there. Sister Elizabeth. Sister Elizabeth is an administrator for the Downey agency. And I have to tell you that I was extremely nervous going to this interview with Sister Elizabeth because I was sure that she wasn't going to think that I was a suitable person to adopt a child. After all, I was middle-aged, I was divorced, I was still single, I wasn't Catholic, so I had in my head that she was not going to like me. And a little secret that I told her a few weeks ago was that day I made a pact with God. I said, okay, dear God, just let this go well, and I will stop smoking, because I was still smoking cigarettes at the time. Anyway, I met with Sister Elizabeth, and we became fast friends. And within a very short period of time, she made it clear to me that she did not use as criteria for adoption your age, your religion, your marital status. What she needed proof of was that you could provide a secure and loving home for a child. So the rest is pretty much history, because this is the wonderful young man that I adopted. Father Paul just spoke a few minutes ago about risk, and I can tell you that adopting a 13-year-old boy as a single woman is not without risk. And it is certainly not without trials and tribulations. And for me, it was not without opposition, which is something I really want to just talk to you about for a few minutes. I found that most people, or many people in my world, were very opposed to my decision to adopt an adolescent boy. Starting with my 7-year-old godson, who overheard me speaking with his mother and very promptly called me up and very dramatically explained to me that I was throwing him to the sidewalk, and what did I need another kid for? After all, I had him. I also later found out that my own 13-year-old nephew was furious with me. Many of my friends thought I was making a big mistake, and my one and only sister thought that I had lost my mind. And what was I doing adopting this adolescent boy from a troubled background? So let me just tell you how all this opposition turned out. 1 week after meeting Casey, this same little precocious little 7-year-old marched himself into my living room and with his hands like this said, Aunt Shelley, you have to adopt Casey ASAP. My friends who thought I was making a mistake have all grown to refer to Casey as their nephew. their children, all my friends' children, refer to Casey as their cousin. And among this little group of cousins, Casey has become the mentor and the guru for the group. My sister, who was probably my biggest opposition, has now become probably Casey's biggest fan. She relies on him from everything, for like fixing all her electronics, helping her cook, helping her fix the plumbing in her house. Recently, she had was hosting a big party at her house for which she was very nervous. And Casey and I arrived early, and when we came to the door, forget about greeting me, she turned around and said, "Oh, thank God Casey's here, now I can relax." So this young man, who was only 13 at the time from the troubled background, managed to wiggle his way into the hearts of all my friends and family, and he managed to totally wiggle his way completely into the core of my life and my being. Which reflects back on something that I've known for a long time, that those who do the saving are the ones who are saved. I want to just tell you one more thing. 3 months ago, Casey and I bought a new home, a little larger than when we were living before. And my best friend said, "How come now that he's grown up and leaving soon, you chose to buy a bigger place?" And I said, "Well, I want to have a place for my grandchildren to sleep over." She said, "But you don't have any grandchildren." I said, "Well, that's true. But once upon a time, I didn't have any children, and having a child was something I could only fantasize about. And yet I have raised this beautiful son. So having grandchildren is something that I can dare to dream of." I guess I wouldn't be a mother if I didn't take a minute to boast. Casey came as an adolescent. He finished high school. He graduated college with honors. In 3 months, he is going to finish his graduate degree. He will have a master's degree. He is a very accomplished and skilled horseman, and all the way around a great guy. I can't imagine what his life would have been like. Was he making fun of me? I couldn't imagine what his life would have been like if he had not been adopted, and I cannot imagine what my life would be like had he not been adopted. From the very bottom of my heart, I thank Father Paul, Sister Elizabeth, Dawn, who works with Downey side, is here. I thank everybody. I must tell you that Casey is not alone. He is not one of a few. He is one of hundreds of thousands of children who need a home, who need parents. Father Paul and Sister Elizabeth have told me that right now there must be about 500,000 American boys and girls who don't have parents and don't have homes. The Downey Side Agency has placed thousands of children, but they cannot do it alone. They desperately need your support. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank all of you and ask you for your continued support. Thank you, and I'd like to introduce you to my son.
I'm a little bit taller, I had to turn the mic. So, when I was first asked to speak tonight, several things went through my head. First was flashing back to 10 years ago when I first did this and standing up here in front of hundreds of people that I have no idea who you are, and being nervous and, scared happens. Then I flashed back to the fact that I was nervous and scared, and then I started asking myself, why the hell did I agree to do this again? So, and the answer is Downey side, Father Paul, Sister Elizabeth. I was asked to tell you guys a little bit about my story and how I grew up and everything else, and quite honestly, I can't do that because my story is not very unique. My story happens to hundreds of thousands of kids every day, and it's something that needs to be known. I don't think it's known very well. When I was young, my parents, bless their souls, they did the best they could, but they just were not equipped to have children. The home was abusive, both physically and emotionally, and there was a lot of problems. I grew up raising my siblings. From the time I was 2, 3 years old, I was the parent in the house. I was not a child. And it plays a role. It takes a toll on you. So by the time I entered the system when I was about 7.5, 8 years old, I already knew everything about life in general, I felt. And life was a pain. Life was hard. And it stayed that way for a number of years. I was in and out of a number of homes. Most of those homes were also a pain, abusive. There's one home in particular, I was asked to share the story this morning. One home in particular, I was on a farm, and the family had their own biological children. They did the foster care system, and they like to take advantage of the foster children, we'll put it that way. And they had me digging graves for their dead cows. Don't know why. God forbid, they just, butcher them like normal people, but they had me dig graves. So that's what I did for a number of months in my childhood, until eventually I got tired of it and refused to return to that place. So that's what happens. And like I said, my story is not unique. This happens to children at all times. I mean, even as we're sitting here, there's probably a child in a home somewhere that needs help. It needs Downey side, it needs other agencies like this. And when I was 13, I was approached by my caseworker at the time, said there's a home for you. There's 2 homes that you can do. There's one in Utah, which I didn't want to go to Utah. That's in the middle of the desert, and I was already in the desert. So, and then there was the home up in New York. So I was told about Downey side, I was given a little information about them, and then I was told about my mother. And I kind of made my choice. I decided to go with Downey side. I liked Downey side, I liked my mother. I had very long conversations with her all the time. Eventually we met face to face, and that was kind of the end. At that point, I viewed her as my parent, not as some lady I was talking to on the phone. So, it's Downey side they kind of put me where I needed to be. I'm continually asked what my religion is, both by Sister Liz and Father Paul, and I routinely answer, I really don't have one. My view on life in general is that you get to be where you're supposed to be. And my life took a very long way of getting to where I needed to be, but Downey side placed me there. As my mother said, I've become, I guess successful is the term that people use. I graduated high school with honors, I graduated college with honors, I'm in graduate school, I'm doing well in graduate school. I've got a number of things that I've done well for myself with, and I never would have gotten any of it if it wasn't for Downey side. So, I mean, they need everything that you guys can give them. There's children who need the same opportunities and privileges that I had. So, that's all I can really say. So with this, I'm going to turn it back to Father Paul.